What would it look like if I rode beside a beam of light at the speed of light? That is the simple, fascinating question that would lead Albert Einstein to his general theory of relativity. The question is pretty remarkable, actually. It's simple enough that it can be grasped by even a childlike mind, and yet it's fascinating enough that it can inspire and motivate a scientist toward a lifelong pursuit of the answer to that question. What would it look like if I rode beside a beam of light at the speed of light? It's a pretty fascinating and simple question. And that's not a mistake, certainly, because all great ideas are preceded by simple, fascinating questions. If you've studied for very long in any of the great storehouses of investigation, you know that it's the simple questions and the fascinating questions that are the most profound. In the realm of theology, great ideas are preceded by simple questions like, who is God and what is He like? In philosophy, as complicated as it can be, really the fundamental question that every philosopher is trying to answer is, what is the good life? In scientific inquiry, the basic, simple, fascinating question is, how do things work and how do they work together? In mathematics, the simple, fascinating question is, what is logical? In history, the simple, fascinating question was, what has been before these times and how did we get to where we are? In art, the simple, fascinating question is, how do we understand the beauty that is around us and how can we participate in it? How can we fashion it ourselves? All of these areas that we call the great ideas have simple, fascinating questions in them. And they're simple enough that we can understand them and we can grasp them, and they're fascinating enough that we want to come back to them again and again to get deeper and richer answers to them. So the question for us at Trinity Academy as a classical Christian school is, what is the simple, fascinating question that continues to motivate us as a school? And that question is this: how do we maximize a child's enjoyment of God and the world He has made? Whenever I say a word like enjoyment, it can be kind of nebulous, and we're not exactly sure what we mean by that. But in the context of a classical Christian school, when we say enjoyment, we mean a kind of joy that comes through deeper and deeper understanding. So, how do we maximize a child's joyful understanding of God and the world He has made? So there's two big components there. When we say enjoyment of God, we mean that we want students to embrace the reality that all truth, all goodness, and all beauty comes to us from one source. The Scriptures tell us that every good and every perfect gift comes to us from our Father in heaven, and we want our students to know that every good and beautiful and true thing around us has a source, and that source has a name. When we say that we want students to maximize their enjoyment of the world He has made, we mean that in all of their pursuits later in their life, in their career, in their friendships, when they're studying data, when they're listening to chord progressions, when they're visiting museums, we want them to see all of that as an expression of something that God has made and that they can fully enjoy, they can understand, and it will keep them coming back and being fascinated for the entirety of their life. We exist at Trinity Academy to maximize a child's enjoyment of God and the world He has made. We see every area of study, from math to science to English to history to art to music, all of those areas as potential expressions of worship that are as varied as they are unified. So we want to maximize a child's enjoyment of God and the world He has made. So how do we do that? Well, we answer that question in 5 ways, and we call those 5 ways the 5 hallmarks of Trinity Academy. And more than just an answer to a question, we see the 5 hallmarks of Trinity Academy to be promises that we make to one another. So it's not just a simple question and answer, but it's promises that really unite a community. The first hallmark is foundational to all of the other hallmarks, and it's this: an authentic, Christ-like culture. If you're a North Carolinian, you know that, or you might know, that the state motto of North Carolina is esse quam videre, which means to be rather than to seem. And that's a pretty powerful statement, that authenticity, to be what you really seem to be, That is a pretty powerful statement for a state to have. And I think it also fits for us as a classical Christian school that desires to have an authentic Christ-like community. We don't want to just seem to be a certain thing. We want to be it. And the gulf that exists between being something and simply seeming that way is vast, and it's all important. See, as a school, we want to be a Christ-like culture. We don't want to just seem like a Christ-like culture. If we were satisfied with seeming, well, then we would just throw together a chapel service and we would be happy with behavioral expectations from our students. But we're not satisfied with seeming. We want to be something. And what we want to be is an authentic Christ-like culture. So what that means for us is, and it's odd to say in the context of a school, but as a Christ-like culture, as a Christ-like community, we recognize that man's fundamental need is not education. It's redemption. And so that's the foundation that we explore all of the world's riches together in the context of this school. It's that you and I need grace. We are broken and we need to be mended. And that mending comes from a source that's outside of ourselves. And so it's with humility and with a need for grace and a desire to show grace to one another that we carry out this program of classical Christian education. That authentic Christ-like culture is the perfect foundation on which to build an enormous educational enterprise. And that's what leads us to our second hallmark. The first hallmark was an authentic Christ-like culture, but the second hallmark is a distinctive classical program. Trinity is not like other schools. We believe that classical education is the cultivation of the soul on wisdom and virtue by means of the 7 liberal arts. There's a certain program that is time-tested and is ancient in its origins that we're carrying out here at Trinity Academy. And that distinctive classical program can be talked about in many ways, and there's a lot of images we can use to explain it. But for our time here, I want to just explain it in the context of 2 images. And the first is a staircase. The second one is a society. As a staircase, what we mean by that is when a child begins their educational journey, she starts to feel the demands of education. From the moment that student walks into kindergarten or they walk into TK, they start to feel that certain things are demanded of them. It's not just a step forward, but it's a sometimes laborious step up. We don't want them to stay where they are. We want them to move to the next step, and that step is higher and requires effort. And in some sense, that student is alone. It's a journey for that individual student. They need to learn the fundamentals of grammar, and they need to learn the fundamentals of speech and writing and music and art. They need to learn the fundamentals of all those like they're walking a very narrow staircase by themselves up one step after another, leading to certain milestones that we might call grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And if they get off on those floors, when they get off on the floor of grammar, they have mastered the fundamentals of language. And when they get off on the floor of logic, they have an ability to reason and to understand arguments. And when they get off on the floor of rhetoric, they are able to persuade and to shepherd souls toward virtue. So in one sense, classical education, the distinctive classical program that we have, is a student walking up a narrow staircase one step after another, making achievement after achievement after achievement. Here, that's what's in view, achieving, learning one skill that builds on another, and one after another they build skills until they achieve more and more and they become an accomplished student. But in another sense, classical Christian education is not just like a staircase, it's like a grand and vast society. Here, what's in view is not achievement, it's affections. The things that we love, the things that we care about, the things that we enjoy. And here, the child is never alone. They're surrounded by a community that loves those same things, that's calling them to embrace truth and goodness and beauty. And in a much more mature way as they get older and as they're building skills that go along with that. But as they grow older, they are growing in a deeper understanding of what it is to love truth, goodness, and beauty in the context of a community that all celebrates the same thing. And that community is here at Trinity Academy, but it also stretches through the ages in what we call the great conversation that we see in these lines of great books and the great philosophers that we read and we study together. So when they participate in a distinctive classical program at Trinity Academy, they're going step by step on an individual journey of achievement, and they're going through a societal, a communal growth together to foster these affections for true, good, and beautiful things. Taken together, all of that in one big picture is what we mean by a distinctive classical program. So as they grow in grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and they learn Latin, and they learn how to stand before a crowd of people, and they persuade them toward truth, all of that is done in the context of community. That's a distinctive classical program that shows up in fine arts, that shows up in athletics, and it shows up in academics. That journey through a distinctive classical program really is supported by our next hallmark, which is an inspirational learning environment. When a student walks out on, let's just take this moment as an example. If a student were to walk out onto our fields here at Trinity, and they were to look around them and they were to see a blanket of autumn leaves around them, just beneath a beautiful sky above the trees, there's a certain response and a certain reaction we want a Trinity student to have. And it's multifaceted, and there's a lot that we want to be swirling around in the mind of that child that is really, it's encouraged by their environment. It is inspired by their environment. When they walk out and they look at that blanket of leaves and they behold the beauty of the stratosphere above it, the kinds of reactions, the things that we want there for our students, first, we want theology there. We want them thinking in a certain way, but we want it to sound beautiful, like the heavens declare the glory of God. As they behold those images, we also want poetry there. We want them to be able to say that it is bliss that's brought to me from every fluttering from an autumn tree by Emily Bronte. Whenever they're looking out onto this beautiful scene, we also want science there. We want them to understand the predictability and the order of the seasons. Those same images around them, we want them also to see art there. We want art swirling around in their minds so that when they see beauty, they have the skills to participate in it. They can represent that beauty and they can take it with them. We want philosophy there. We want them to be pursuing a kind of life that treasures those things and wants their life to be represented in that kind of beauty. So in the environment around us, we want to inspire a certain kind of thinking in our students that is also supported by our curriculum. And more than that, that same kind of thinking, that poetic, scientific, artistic, literary kind of thinking is in the mind of every teacher in every classroom. It's our teachers who really serve as the curriculum, as it were, because they love these things and they pursue these things. They make their environment inspirational. And it's that inspirational learning environment that really supports the distinctive classical program that allows us to really explore all the contours of an authentic Christ-like culture. Our next hallmark really serves as a support to all of that, and it is an exemplary organization. When I think of an organization at a school, what I mean by that is the organization side of a school exists to remove every hindrance that might prevent us from exploring all of the things I just talked about with all of our energy. So we want to operate with efficiency and effectiveness. We want to have good processes. We want to operate with integrity. We want to be clear in our communication, and we want to invite people along for the journey. And so we want our organization to operate with integrity and with a real intensity and a zeal that we believe in the mission that we're on. All of that working together, an authentic Christ-like culture, a distinctive classical program, an inspirational learning environment, and an exemplary organization. All of those things working as they ought will work toward our fifth and final hallmark, and that is a thriving future. And when we think about a thriving future at Trinity Academy, it really centers on the one question that we find ourselves asking a lot around here because we're so excited about what the future holds. And that question is, what's next? What's next for us at Trinity Academy? We have a storied history. The Lord has brought us very far. Our community is growing. We have exciting things that are going on, and yet we continue to ask ourselves, what is next? At a classical Christian school like ours, we can very simply answer that what's next for us is that we will continue to deepen our commitment to all that I've just talked about. We'll deepen our commitment and we will broaden the reach of our mission by welcoming more and more students and families into the Trinity community. We're excited to see enrollment growth. We're excited to see new things that are happening in the life of our school. We're just excited about all that we see. I'm also excited to say that recently our board made a monumental decision that will lead us closer to having a permanent academic building on this campus. And I can't wait to unpack all the details of that for you when the time is right. But just know this, we're entering into a new day at Trinity Academy. The truth and the beauty and the goodness that we pursue will never change, and yet the size and the scope of our mission is growing. I am very excited about what the future holds for Trinity Academy as we continue to maximize every student's enjoyment of God and the world that He has made. We do have a very thriving future. And when I think about our thriving future and how far we want to go, I'm reminded of a T.S. Eliot quote when he said, "It's only those who are willing to risk going too far that will ever find out just how far we can go." And so I want us to go far together. I want us to do great things together. And so there is no limit to our potential, and there's no limit to how far we can go if we stay true to these 5 hallmarks of Trinity Academy.